How's it going, everyone? It's Augie from Mars 1000. Today is August 20th, 2020, and we're gonna take a look at two tropical depressions that just formed very recently, with Tropical Depression 14 forming this morning, and then we had Tropical Depression 13, which formed last night. So let's begin by looking at Tropical Depression 13, which is currently just off the coast of the Caribbean islands. Well, not just off the coast. It's several hundred miles away from the Caribbean islands, and you see that track, which is taking it mainly north of the main Caribbean islands like Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Haiti, and even Cuba. And then you see eventually it reaches the U.S. as a hurricane, potentially making landfall over Florida as a small hurricane, as a low end hurricane. So this is definitely something to watch. It could definitely impact land, as it's becoming more likely it'll impact land, but the exact question of where it will impact land is still very uncertain, because you have to keep in mind only 2/3 of the time a tropical storm or hurricane stays within the cone. So there's still that 1/3 of a chance that this completely stays out the cone. And even if it stays within the cone, there's still a lot of uncertainty of where this could go within the cone, especially when we're talking 3 to 5 days out, where the cone definitely expands in size. So let's first take a look at Tropical Depression 13's composition at this point, and you see that it has a very elongated sort of area of convection, where we're seeing thunderstorm activity here, but we're also seeing thunderstorm activity to the south and even towards the south and east. However, the National Hurricane Center has determined that the main center of circulation of this storm is towards the northern part of this convection, where we're seeing the most thunderstorm activity, and as a result, the lowest pressure of the storm. And there's definitely a visible rotation within this storm, and the National Hurricane Center is pretty confident that this will be the low pressure system that eventually will develop into a tropical storm. So that's definitely something to note as going forward, because even though the south side won't because the south side, it's unlikely that, well, it's pretty much impossible that this will develop into any tropical storm, since it's too far south to really get as much convection, as much rotation as this storm over here, which is getting more of that Coriolis effect since it's a little bit further up north. However, outside of its elongated convection, we're starting to see a little bit of rotation in this, and I expect over the next several days this will become it will become more evident that this is definitely going to develop into a tropical storm. And there isn't really a ton of stuff that's slowing this down that's going to really completely prevent this from developing into a tropical storm, or really weaken it over I would say the next couple of days. Because if we take a look at the water vapor, there isn't a ton of dry air. However, the GFS is expecting a little bit more dry air as this continues on to the west northwest, and I think that's currently the reason why the GFS is sort of not leaning towards developing this rapidly or developing this much from what it is right now, and it's because it expects some of this dry air to entrain the storm. However, since this storm for the most part will be relatively small as it breaks away from this convection that's towards the south of it, it may fend off that dry air, because the thing with small storms is that they don't absorb a lot of air around them. So, and because of that, since they don't absorb a lot of air around them, it's less likely that it's going to absorb dry air that's hundreds of miles away. And these small storms could pretty much fend off some of this dry air. So we have to see how small this storm gets and to determine whether this could deal with the dry air that's expected in the future. But it definitely seems like the GFS is not leaning towards developing this rapidly. So here's where the GFS puts it right now, and there's a decent amount of dry air just to the west of this. And then as we continue to move forward, we start to see some of that dry air entering the southern part, and we're starting to see the the western portion of the storm really not have much in terms of humidity or convection, as we see all the convection is towards the eastern side of this storm, which is definitely showing that this dry air is going to affect it from really developing, since dry air is stable air, and since we're going to see stable air towards the western side, then we're less likely to see a lot of convection and as a result wind energy because of this dry air. And then if we continue to move forward, you see that dry air doesn't really like move away, as there's still an abundance of dry air as we move 42 hours from now, which is approximately 2 days from now, which I think is a reason why the GFS isn't that lenient of developing this much. It's definitely like developing this slowly, but it isn't really anything. The GFS is currently saying that this won't be much more than a tropical storm, which is a huge like difference from what it was expecting only a couple days. The last run, because last run it was expecting quite a strong hurricane just off the coast of Florida and impacting the Florida Panhandle. But now the GFS is a little less lenient of developing this. However, it seems like later as it enters Florida, we do see a little bit more convection, and we do see that strengthening rapidly onto Florida. And I expect the reason why is because the moisture becomes, there's going to be more humidity in this. There's going to be more upward motion in the atmosphere to allow this storm to develop as it heads closer to Florida. However, throughout the Caribbean, it's really struggling to develop, but then later it could develop into something. If we take a look at the European model to see what it's stating, the European currently, as of right now, is in pretty good agreement that this won't develop much over the next several days, and there won't. As you can see, this yellow piece right here is Tropical Depression 13, and it seems like the European is peaking the strength of this very early, only a day from now, and then as we move forward, it becomes very weak. We don't see much energy or vorticity. So it doesn't seem like the European wants to develop this anything more than maybe a low-end tropical storm or tropical depression, and the energy moves over Florida. So even though the National Hurricane Center is still predicting this to maintain tropical storm strength and then potentially strengthen into a hurricane. And I think the reason why the National Hurricane Center is leaning towards this forecast is because there isn't going to be that much wind shear either that would otherwise completely kill the storm. Because if we take a look at the wind shear map as of right now, it's currently under favorable wind shear, believe it or not, and if we move forward, it won't deal with that much wind shear to completely kill it off. And I think that's the reason why the National Hurricane Center is maintaining its forecast that this will remain a tropical storm and not really weaken much, or then maybe strengthen into a hurricane once it enters more favorable conditions when it comes to humidity. So that's if we take a look at the GFS wind shear map, the 200 millibar map, forecast map for the northern Atlantic, so let me load this up. I apologize for the long load times. So here is currently the 200 millibar wind shear map, and you see that it isn't under a ton of wind shear. There is a little bit of wind shear from this upper level low that's currently in the middle of the Atlantic. However, it isn't really enough to really completely kill it off, which is why I think the National Hurricane Center is still leaning towards maintaining the strength of this storm. And then if we move around 90 hours from now, you see the wind shear completely dies down. And I think this could be the area where Tropical Depression 13 has a chance to develop into a hurricane. And even with some of the dry air, it will enter more favorable conditions when it comes to humidity. So as of right now, for Tropical Depression 13, I would say that this will probably maintain tropical storm strength, maybe weaken at times, but then re-strengthen back into a tropical storm or depression over its time just north of the Caribbean islands. And then it may have a chance to redevelop into a tropical storm or maybe a hurricane as we head into Florida. So I would say for the Caribbean islands, definitely keep in watch of that, because rain is certainly not out of possibility. I don't expect any major impacts. However, there probably will be at least some impacts when it comes to rainfall, especially if this storm takes the southern portion of this track. And when it comes to Florida, definitely watch this, because I wouldn't be surprised if you see a hurricane at your doorstep 5 days from now. I'm not saying prepare now, because it's far too early to really say this will make landfall as a hurricane, especially with both of the computer models against that idea that this will strengthen into a hurricane as of right now. However, definitely something to keep an eye on, as we'll keep track of where exactly this will go. If you take a look at the guidance forecast for Tropical Depression 13, you see that a lot of the assembly models strengthen this into a hurricane and pretty much going into the Gulf Coast. Now, what will determine the changes of the track? So I would say if this storm is stronger than we'd expect, then I would say that there's a more likely chance that this will turn more north earlier, since the wind shear that's going to be towards since the strong upper level winds are going to be towards the western portion of the storm, will have more an effect of the hurricane's track, since when a hurricane's stronger, the cloud tops are higher and pretty much its entire circulation is higher, which means that it's more likely to be affected by some of the upper level winds, which would turn it more northward earlier, which could mean that this will be more of an effect towards eastern Florida and maybe even the southeast coast of Georgia and the Carolinas. We have to wait and see. However, if this is weaker, I expect this to go more west, since it's less likely to have to get some of the influence of the strong upper level winds that are trying to turn this up to the northeast. So I would expect that this will mainly move towards the west if this is a weaker storm. However, there's still a lot of days out, and we have to see what unfolds over the next several days. So just keep an eye on this if you're in the Caribbean islands and Florida, because this could be something that could potentially be major in Florida if everything goes right for this storm. But now let's take a look at Tropical Depression 14, which also just formed this morning with maximum sustained winds of 35 miles per hour, and it's moving at the exact same speed as Tropical Depression 13 at 21 miles per hour. And you could see that the National Hurricane Center is pretty much maintaining its strength as a tropical storm, and then by Tuesday it's pretty much right at Texas and Louisiana's doorstep. So if we take a look at the water vapor imagery Atlantic wide, you see that the convection is very elongated, which means that we're more likely to see a larger tropical storm, and that makes it more likely that it makes it more likely that this won't develop very rapidly, since with large storms they absorb a lot of air around them, like I said, and it's more likely we're going to see dry air entrain the storm if the circulation is very large. So it's very elongated, you can see. However, there's a lot of convection. It's currently under fairly favorable conditions. However, that's going to change because there's this strong upper level trough dipping through the Gulf of Mexico right now, and I think that's definitely going to slow it down and maybe weaken it over the next day or two, and then maybe have a chance of strengthening by the time this upper level low moves more towards the north, as a ridge of high pressure will be located just off the southeast coast. That'll pretty much force this trough more to the north, which may give it an opportunity to re-strengthen over the Gulf of Mexico. So if you take a look at the GFS's wind shear map as of right now, you see that trough is bringing strong wind shear and upper level winds through this region, and it's very unfavorable. However, as we continue, we're going to see that trough sort of begin to turn north from it's gonna now move towards the north because of this ridge of high pressure that's gonna form off the coast, and that may give it an opportunity to re-strengthen as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. And then by the time we hit Tuesday, it could strengthen fairly rapidly at this point, because the high pressure is going to be at an angle to where this storm will be experiencing mainly the upper level winds will primarily be from the south to the north, which is favorable for tropical cyclone development in the northern Atlantic, since these winds pretty much coincide with the trade winds in this area, and will especially strengthen the eastern side of this storm. And we could see a strong tropical storm or maybe even a hurricane make landfall in Louisiana. However, there's still a lot to definitely determine with this storm, and also the dry air is going to affect this as well, since we're going to see dry air entering the southern part of the storm like the GFS model states. So that's definitely something that could completely kill off this storm. However, we could see this storm strengthen rapidly before it makes landfall, because it's going to be in an area where the upper level winds will coincide with the typical trade winds in that region, where we will see rapid intensification. However, you see, as a result of this trough, we're going to see dry air entering the southern part of the storm, which could limit it from really rapidly strengthening. However, it's definitely something to watch for Louisiana and Texas, so keep in mind of that over the next several days. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more content, and I hope you guys all have a good day, a good evening, or a good morning whenever you're watching this. So have a good day.